For 2 nights, we had carried our son through country that no longer felt like ours. 3 days before, riders had come down from the ridge road at dusk, torches low, and by morning, our village was smoke and silence. I had seen enough. A neighbor's door kicked open, a hand raised that never came down again, to know we could not wait for the raiders to decide what we were worth. So we ran, my wife Mara with the bundle of bread and a knife, our son Toman wrapped against my chest, our dog Saro keeping close to our heels instead of ranging ahead the way he used to. The wind had turned cruel by the second night, cutting through wool and skin alike. Toman had stopped crying an hour before, which frightened me more than his screaming ever had. A quiet child in that cold was a child running out of fight. The rock wall rose out of the dark like something that had been waiting for us. A narrow black mouth breathing damp air into the wind. Mira stopped walking. "It could be anything in there," she said. I knew she was right. But behind us, distant and getting less distant, a dog was barking that was not ours. I went first, turning my shoulder so Tommen would not scrape against stone. The air changed the moment we crossed the threshold. Wet earth, cold mineral, and underneath it, something almost like relief. Saro pushed past my legs and trotted in without hesitation. Tail low but steady, the first calm I had seen in him for 2 days. We found a shelf of dry ground past the first bend, out of the wind's reach. Near the wall, half buried in grit, lay a ring of stones blackened by old fire. Not ash from that week. Not ash from that year. I touched it with 2 fingers, cold, packed hard, the kind of cold that comes from a fire dead a long time. "Someone lived here," Mira said. "Someone knew how to live here," I said, because there was a difference. The ring was set back from a thin seam of water running down the rock, close enough to reach, far enough not to flood when the rains came. Whoever built it had chosen with care. We laid Tommen on the driest patch we could find, and Mira tore a strip from her hem to pillow his head. I struck flint against my knife for the better part of an hour before a small flame caught in the tinder Mira had kept dry against her body the whole flight. It threw orange light against the curve of the wall, and for the first time since the riders came, none of us were shaking from the cold alone. I do not know how long we sat there, listening to the drip of water somewhere deeper in the rock, before I noticed Saro had gone still. Not asleep, not relaxed, but still in the way of an animal listening to something the rest of us could not hear. He faced the dark passage at the back of the grotto, where our fire did not reach, ears forward, a low sound building in his throat. I told myself it was an echo. Caves always breathe strange sounds back at you. But when I picked up a dry branch and held it into the firelight, I saw what Saro had already smelled. Drag marks in the dust of the passage floor, too straight to be water, too recent to be old. Something had come this way, and not long before we had. Mira saw my face change and pulled Tommen closer without needing to be told why. "We're not alone in here," she said. It was not a question. I looked at the ash ring again, no longer just a sign that someone once knew how to survive this place, but a warning that we had walked, without meaning to, into ground somebody else still considered theirs. I told Mira to stay by the fire and keep Tommen close, and I took the burning branch into the passage. Every step made the walls narrower, the drip of water louder, until the light caught on something that was not stone. A second fire ring, this one recent, still smelling faintly of smoke, and beside it, a man. He was thin the way winter makes men thin, wrapped in furs gone gray with dust, and he was already on his feet with a skinning knife before I finished seeing him. "This is mine," he said, voice cracked from disuse. "Ground's mine. Water's mine. Go back the way you came." I told him we had a sick child, that we meant no harm, that we would leave at first light if he let us. He didn't lower the knife. "First light won't save you. There's riders on the Ridge Road, and they don't stop looking because the sun comes up." He said it like a threat, but I understood then it wasn't one. It was information he hadn't meant to give away. "You've seen them," I said. 3 days now, hunting something. Or someone." His eyes moved past me, toward the fire glow at the mouth of the passage, toward my wife and son. Something in his face shifted. Not kindness, but calculation. "That fire of yours. Smoke goes up through a crack in the rock near the entrance. Anyone standing on the ridge above at dawn will see it." My stomach dropped. We had built our fire without thinking to check where the smoke would go. "Then help us," I said. "You know this place. Help us hide the smoke, and we'll share what food we have left." He laughed, short and humorless. "Sharing got the last family who came through here killed. I gave them my fire. Riders followed the smoke, same as I'm telling you now. I buried what was left of them under that shelf you're probably sitting on." I did not know if it was true or if he was testing how afraid we already were. But when I looked down, I saw what I had missed in the dark. The ground near our fire pit was too even, too deliberately packed, unlike the rougher stone around it. I went back to Mara, and I did not tell her all of it. I told her enough. The smoke, the crack in the rock, the riders still hunting 3 days out. We killed the fire down to embers and packed damp moss over the crack in the ceiling until the smoke thinned to almost nothing, working in the dark with Toman whimpering weakly between us. The man came out of the passage an hour later, watching us work without helping, without leaving either. "You did that fast," he said. "Good. Means you might live." He crouched near Toman, close enough that I put myself between them. He didn't argue the space. "Child's breathing wrong," he said instead. "Too fast, too shallow. That's not just cold." Mira's hand went still on Toman's forehead. She looked at me, and I understood, before she said it, that the man was right. Our sun was burning under her palm, not freezing. The hermit sat back on his heels and studied the boy the way a man studies weather before a storm. "There's yarrow and willow bark grows near a dead tree 1/2 mile east of here," he said finally. "Fever like that, past a night, past 2, it doesn't break on its own, not in a child that small." "Then I'll go," I said. "In Rider's country, at night?" He shook his head slowly. "You go looking like that, you don't come back, and then it's just her and the boy in a hole with a stranger who buried the last people who trusted him." He let that sit. "Wait for gray light, not full light. Gray light before the riders start moving again. That's your window." I did not trust him, but I no longer had the luxury of only trusting people I trusted. Toman's fever did not wait for gray light to worsen. By the deepest part of the night, his small body had gone rigid one moment and boneless the next, his breath catching high in his throat in a way that made Mara press her ear to his chest, just to be sure it was still moving air. Ciro lay pressed against the boy's side without being told to, the way dogs do when they understand something before the people around them say it out loud. "He needs more than yarrow," Mira whispered. "He needs it now, not at gray light." The hermit, his name, we learned that night, was Bora, crouched near the wall with his arms wrapped around his knees, watching the boy the way a man watches a fire he cannot control. Gray light is when the riders sleep off their watchfires and change their scouts, he said. Go before that, and you walk into whoever's still awake. Go after, and you might be walking to bury him instead of saving him. I looked at my wife. I looked at my son. There was no answer that didn't cost something. I'll go now, I said. Alone. Fast. If I'm not back by gray light, don't wait for me. Bora knows a way out through the high passage. He told me that much already. I hadn't asked Bora to confirm it. He didn't deny it either, which was its own kind of answer. Mira gripped my sleeve hard enough to hurt. If you don't come back, I will. I didn't know if that was true. I said it anyway, because some promises exist to be said, not kept. I left the grotto with nothing but Bora's knife, traded for my own dull one, and his directions repeated 3 times until I could see the dead tree in my mind before I ever reached it. The cold outside had teeth I had forgotten in the shelter of the stone. Twice I dropped flat into frozen grass at the sound of hooves on wind-carried ground, only to realize afterward it was my own heartbeat, loud enough to mistake for horses. I found the dead tree by the pale shape of its broken crown against the stars. Willow bark peeled easier than I expected, cold brittle, coming away in long, curling strips. The yarrow was harder, low, and silvered with frost, and I tore at it with numb fingers until I had more than I thought we'd need, because I did not intend to make this walk twice. On the way back, I lost the trail once, doubling through a stand of birch that all looked the same in starlight, and for nearly 20 minutes, I could not find the grotto's black seam in the rock at all. I remember standing still, willow bark crushed in my fist, telling myself that panic was a worse enemy right now than cold or distance. Ciro's bark, thin and far off, was what finally turned me the right way. Bora must have let him out to signal me, a risk that could have called riders as easily as it called me home. When I dropped back into the grotto, gray light was already climbing the walls outside. Mira had a small fire going again, shielded now behind a fold of rock Bora had shown her. Smoke bled thin through a channel that scattered it before it ever reached open air. We boiled the willow bark in what water we had and got it into Tommen, a spoonful at a time. His lips cracked, his eyes half open and unseeing. It did not work quickly. Fever does not care how far a man walked or how much he wants it to break. We sat through the gray morning watching our son's chest rise and fall, waiting for a sign that never seemed to come fast enough, while outside, the world that had been hunting us kept moving closer. It was Bora who heard them first, the particular give of frozen grass under hooves, not wind, not deer, but something rhythmic and deliberate coming down from the ridge road toward the rock line where our grotto opened to the sky. Voices, he said, flat against the stone, eyes closed like a man listening to weather. 4, maybe 5. They're working the tree line east to west. Toward the dead tree, I said, toward my tracks. I had been careful, but careful in the dark, with a dying sun on my mind, was not the same as careful in daylight, with trained eyes, reading the ground. Mira's face went the color of the ash ring on the floor. Tommen's fever had broken an hour before. Barely, his skin damp instead of burning. His breathing evened into something that sounded almost like sleep instead of struggle. And now, the very stillness that had let him rest was the thing that might get him found. A crying child could be explained away by nothing. A quiet camp, smoke thinned to nothing, tracks doubling back on themselves. That was work. That was people trying not to be seen. Bora moved before I did, kicking dirt over the fire until only a faint warmth remained in the stone beneath it. No glow, no smoke. "High passage," he said. "Narrow, cold. But it comes out half a mile north, above the tree line, where they won't think to look because no one climbs into rock to escape riders. They run along the ground, where horses can follow." "You said you'd bury us like the others," I said, because I needed to know, right then, if I was following him into a trap or away from one. Bora didn't answer that directly. The others ran at the sound of hooves, ran loud, ran fast, straight out the front, straight into open ground where a horse outruns a man every time. I'm not telling you to run, I'm telling you to climb where they can't. We had no better plan and no time to build one. Mira wrapped Toman tight enough that even the small shift of movement wouldn't wake him crying, and I took Ciro by the scruff to keep him silent at my side. Bora led us into the passage I had explored the night before, past his own fire ring, into a crack in the rock so narrow I had to turn Toman sideways against my chest, exactly as I had the first night we entered this place. Behind us, I heard the scrape of a boot at the grotto's mouth. A voice, low, calling something back to the others. They had found the entrance. Bora pressed a hand flat against my chest. "Wait." And for 3 long breaths, none of us moved while boots crossed the outer chamber below, kicking through the cold fire pit, through the ash ring that had once told us someone had survived here before. A man's voice said the ashes were cold, days cold, and another argued they'd only just been walked over. I felt Mira's whole body lock rigid beside me, one hand cupped over Toman's mouth, though he made no sound at all. Then, impossibly, Ciro growled, low, barely audible, but enough. Bora's hand shot out and closed the dog's jaw shut with a grip I didn't know a man that thin could manage, and in the same motion, he pressed 2 fingers hard against a pressure point behind Ciro's ear that made the growl die into a whimper and then nothing. The voices below argued a moment longer, someone insisting the cave was a dead end, not worth the climb, riders' horses waiting up on cold ground with no one watching them. That argument saved us. Boots retreated. Hooves picked up again outside, moving west along the tree line. Away from the dead end, nobody wanted to search further. We did not move again until the sound of hooves had faded past, hearing entirely. And even then, Bora made us wait the length of a slow count to 100 before he let his shoulders drop. "Gray light bought you the fever cure," he said quietly. "Silence just bought you your lives." We waited in the high passage until true daylight, then climbed back down. Bora was already at the fire ring, not rebuilding it, but scattering it, spreading cold ash thin across the stone until it looked like nothing at all. "Why hide it? The riders are gone," I said. "These ones are," Bora said. "Others come every season. This ring kept me alive 2 winters. It'll keep the next family too, if it looks worth nothing to stop for." I understood then what the old ash had meant that first night. Not proof the place was safe, but proof someone before us had made it safer, quietly, for strangers they'd never meet. Toman woke that afternoon, weak but clear-eyed, asking for water in a voice cracked with thirst instead of fever. Mira wept for the first time since we'd fled, not from fear now, but because there was finally room for something else. Bora would not come with us. "Riders know these hills now. This is still the safest ground I know. You 3 have somewhere to run to. I don't." Before we left, I helped him reset the stone shelf where he kept what little he owned, the one we'd first mistaken for nothing more than a worn ledge. I understood now it had been built on purpose, to outlast him. We left at dusk. At the mouth of the grotto, I looked back once. Bora had already faded into the shadow, and the fire ring behind him looked, once more, like ash 100 years old, like a place no one would think to search. 2 nights later, Tommen asked, in the small, clear voice of a child who'd decided the worst was behind him, whether the man in the cave would be all right alone. I told him the truth. Some people don't run from danger. They build a life inside it and pass on what they've learned to whoever needs it next. The stone hadn't saved us because it was warm or hidden. It saved us because someone before us chose, on purpose, to make it survivable, and trusted that would matter to strangers he'd never meet. That was the last thing the grotto taught us. Not that fear kneels before shelter, that shelter is only ever built by people who once stopped running long enough to leave something behind for the next family in the dark.